How many of you were here this morning? All right, how many of you were not here this morning? Okay, well, I'm going to share some things with you. Unlike previous years, you have a double blessing this year at camp meeting, which may not be the norm. But Dr. Diehl will be with us giving 10 total sessions. So normally we have a health seminar speaker that presents 5 different messages, but we have 10 different messages throughout the week. So, and the extra good news is all 10 of them will be available online for you to download or listen to whenever you want. Just give a day or so for each to be uploaded, and then you will be able to access that by going to www.carolinasda.org and go look for camp meeting, find the speaker name, look at Monday, AM, PM, and you'll be able to find the one you're looking for. Okay, great. So, as you notice, this is a very popular seminar. So you can look around and tell that, right? And so what I would like for you to do, if you're perhaps in a row where there's one seat somewhere in the middle, if you wouldn't mind sharing some love with some brother or sister and get a little bit closer so that those that are coming in trying to find a seat will be able to do so towards the ends. Okay, if you wouldn't mind helping us out with that. We had about 300 here earlier, and it looks like we have about 300 already here right now. Okay, I do want to mention to you that I have a little handout here with me. I only have 100 for the week, and this is for a training event, Train the Trainer. So what you have going on here is something that we can take in and we can benefit our own lives and share. But this is a Train the Trainer event for creation, health, and reversing diabetes. This is going to be August 18 and 19 at the Foster Church in Asheville. And at the Spartanburg Church, August 25 and 26. It's a small cost that covers the lunch there, or lunches. And Saturday, the Creation Health is from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And 8:30 to 5 on Sunday is the Reversing Diabetes. And Sharon Mahoney, I want her to raise her hand. If you want to know how well this works for your community, talk to her. Could you stand up for me one moment? Thank you. So this is Miss Sharon Mahoney, and they are involved in a church group, a church plant in Valdez, North Carolina, and they are really having an impact on their community. Their community is becoming less and less. Weight, that is. Okay, so also you notice that if you came in this afternoon, you found a booklet here. Well, we only have one booklet for the whole week, so there's no more handouts. This is all there is, okay? So this booklet is for the remainder of the sessions. So if you get one today, make sure that you don't expect to find one later, okay? If you don't mind, one per family, because we want to make sure that everybody who comes to the health seminar for this entire week will be able to have one, okay? We just have a few extras, and so if you have enough for your family, you can just leave it on the chairs, and we'll be sure to collect those at the end of the session. Okay, so I would like to invite Dr. Diehl up. Dr. Diehl, as you know, is the founder of Lifestyle Medicine Institute and the CHIP program, and he will be sharing a little bit about that more as we go along, but I want to have a prayer with him as we get started. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be good stewards of our health, because we know whatever we have has been given as a gift from you. So I pray that your Holy Spirit would lead us as we talk about that and how we can implement lifestyle changes and how we can share this information in a very winsome way with those we love and care for and in our communities. Please bless Dr. Diehl as he shares, and bless us as we hear. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. You all have this little booklet. What I'd like you to do, since some of you may not remember to bring it every time to the session here, why don't we go down to page number 66. We just spent a couple of minutes on that. Page number 66. Page number 66. You see, there are some guidelines that can make a lot of difference in how you deal with some of these common modern killer diseases. You will see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arrows going down on the left side, and there are 5 arrows on the further right side going up. This means you want to lower some of the intake of some of these things, eat less, and you want to eat more of those that would probably make a lot of difference for you. Also, in the left bottom corner, you see a little chart there. You see that? It gives you some idea what the average consumption of fat is in our society, probably 80 to 120 grams. We recommend maybe 40 or less. It gives you some idea what to aim for. Okay? And then you look at sugar. Most people take in about 35 teaspoons of sugar a day. And we'd like you to perhaps think in terms of moving towards maybe 30 or 20 or 10. It's a progression. Not everybody can do everything just at once. Most of us do it in steps. Okay? But this is the goal then. When it comes to cholesterol, most people get in about 400 milligrams of cholesterol. If they have a couple of eggs, that's 400 right there. And so we like to recommend that you lower that to 50 milligrams, or if you are becoming a total vegetarian, then you don't have any cholesterol, because cholesterol is only found in animal products, as you know. So we recommend move towards less than 50 milligrams of cholesterol. And then when it comes to salt, most of us take in about 10 grams of salt, which is 10 times more than the body needs. Whenever you have a society where you have a high salt intake, you always have high blood pressure problems. Like in our society, 70 million adults have high blood pressure. And so what we recommend is that you at least cut it in half. We recommend 4 grams. The body only needs about 1 gram. But, so we are trying to help you to move towards less salt. And that's the most difficult thing for you to do. Because when you cut salt, everything tastes flat. Your husband will be fighting you if you're doing the cooking. But say, honey, it's only for 3 weeks, 21 days. And then you will make the adjustments. And then you say, there's too much salt in this food here because you just went to a restaurant. And you say, wow, because you change. The taste buds change. So just bear with his discomfort for just a few weeks, and you will have him much, much longer around. Right? And then we have fiber. And most Americans only get about 10 grams of fiber, and most societies in non-developed countries, they usually get about 50 or 60 or 70 grams of fiber. And we should probably get at least 40 or so grams of fiber a day. When you don't get enough fiber, you have a very hard time being productive. You sit there and you fight this thing, and you read the whole Reader's Digest. When you go to this kind of program where you have the number of grams that God provided in real food, there's no fiber in cheese, there's no fiber in meat, there's no fiber in sausage, there's no fiber in all these kind of things. But when you eat plant foods, that's where the fiber is. And you go into the bathroom, you're in and you're out and you're done. You can't read the Reader's Digest any longer. You're on the move. And you don't need any pills, anything like this. That's what it ought to be. Once a day. Not once a week. Once a day. Easy. No distorted faces. Just smile on your face. Okay, let's fiber. So think about this, and fiber only comes in plant foods. Like beans. And salads. And fruits. And vegetables. And whole grains. It's nice, smooth, even. It'll put a smile on your face, I promise you. And then water, we like you really to think about drinking more water. Probably 5, 6, 7, 8 glasses is a good idea. Especially when you have a lot of fiber in your food. You want to drink more water. Just don't drink it at night. I had a man come to me and he said, "Sir, ever since I followed your program, I'm up all night long." I said, "When are you drinking your water?" "Well, before I go to bed." I said, "No, that's the wrong time." Do it during the daytime. And then you come to page number 67. You see that chart there? The 2 mirrors, mirror imaged triangles. One is red, one is green. The further you are to the left, you see above it says worst health outcomes, the more disease you will have. The more you move from the right, from the red on the left side to the right, which is green, what happens there? Best health outcomes. You can actually affect your disease processes. You will find that your weight goes down. You will find that your blood sugar will come down. Your blood pressure will come down. Your cholesterol will come down. Your spirits will move. Your depression will lift. It happens when you go from the left side to the right side. And the way we have done this is so that you feel this is not a dogma. We don't tell you, you have to go from red to green in one day. Most people can't do that. But we say, why don't you reduce the red-colored foods and increase the green-colored foods, and ultimately you get to where you want to be. Now, if you have diabetes, if you have heart disease, you cannot do that slowly. You have to go all the way from one to the next, ideally. Are you with me there? Are you with me? Okay. So, and then you go to page number 68. And this is called the New Start principles that you all know, right? So it puts it together very, very nicely for you to have some opportunity to set some goals. Today I want to talk to you about the great controversy in the area of nutrition. When we're talking about the great controversy in the religious world, we talk about the great controversy between God and an adversary. And only if you have an adversary can you really explain God's dealing in the world. When people come to me and say, "I cannot believe in God. Look what happened with the tsunamis. Look here and there." Yeah. There is another player involved here. That's a great adversary, the enemy. And that enemy is very eager for us to have clouded minds so we don't really fully understand the benevolence and the love of a God who cares, but who gives Satan time to show what he really is like. Are you with me there? Yes. Now I want to talk to you a little bit today about the big confusion that we have in the area of how we should live and how we should eat. Everybody has a different idea, it seems, nowadays. And the media is telling you every day something new. There's a new diet every week. There's a new emphasis. One time it's low salt, then it's high salt. One day it's a high fat, then it's low fat. One is low protein, then it's high protein. And the people say, I don't know what we can really believe. What is right? Now remember, the media has only one purpose, and that is to feed you information. Whether it's right or wrong, it's a different issue. And many times, even the data that is being published in medical journals can be very, very confusing to the professionals. Because we have to remember that there's a great controversy out there. And there is someone that is creating doubts, that is using sometimes inappropriate means to increase profitability rather than truth. If I would tell you some of the things, you would be absolutely shocked. How many times reports in medical journals are colored and influenced by the people who funded the study, which is, when it comes to drug studies, it's usually the drug industry, the pharmaceutical industry, that pays for the studies, and then they feel we have a right. It's our data. We can write it the way we want to. And it's always very tempting, even to honest people, to kind of influence the final presentation in favor of what we want to accomplish. We lose our objectivity when you have companies that are making a product are also becoming the judges of evaluating the research. Are you with me there? Okay. So it becomes very, very confusing. So I want to deal with that. It's a little bit of a difficult lecture, but I think you'll be just right on. Okay? Here's a word of wisdom to consider. It's about habits and choices. It comes from a lady by the name of Ellen G. White. It's an old, time-honored writing that has stood the test of time. She said, there are few who realize, as they should, how much their habits of diet have to do with their health, with their character. Oh, wait a minute. How we eat has something to do with character? Then she said it has something to do with our usefulness in this world. Is that true? Yes, of course it is. And their eternal destiny. These are very powerful words of great consequence. It's something we perhaps need to think about. And then she says, the appetite should ever be in subjection to the moral and intellectual powers. Oh, I like it. Is that an intellectual choice? I like it. That's coming from the gut, isn't it? It's not really, it's not it's just sort of a redneck approach, isn't it? I like it. I don't care what anybody says. Come on. You want to be around? You want to see the grandkids grow up? You want to be a kind person? You want to listen to the Spirit? You want to use your head instead of your neck? Well, I have to die anyway. Yeah, but when and how? Do you know that most people that have this attitude, many times the average American probably has 15 to 20 years of some of these chronic diseases before they die. By the time they're 55 years of age, they have high blood pressure, the diabetes happens, the diabetes sets in, the depression comes in, high cholesterol numbers, medications, first 3, then 5, then 15, then 25 medications every day. And then over the next 15, 20 years, you gradually die until it's over. And we know from the Adventist Health Study that people that live a more wiser lifestyle, that pay some attention to this kind of words of counsel, they may develop some of these diseases not at 50 or 55, but they develop them when they're 75, 78, 80 years of age, 85 years of age, and then oftentimes these diseases still happen, but they happen very fast, and in 2 years it's over. Sometimes called the compressed morbidity, a compressed sickness. But you have had 20 good years before, which other people don't have because they die slowly. Are you with me on this? This is a very important concept. So this is, well, I have to die. Yeah, of course we have to die. And you're dragging down your loved ones and everybody else? That's true, isn't it? So we want to find out what can we do to minimize that likelihood. Still things can happen. The body is a very complex organism. But nevertheless, on the average, we can do a lot to help ourselves because we are ultimately, to a large extent, in charge of how long we live and the quality of life that we have. We are having to play a role. We have something to say about this. And God honors this as we make an effort. He usually does. And if not, there's a special reason for it too, somehow. And so she says, the appetite should ever be in subjection to the moral and intellectual powers. The body should be the servant to the mind. The taste buds should be the servant to the mind. Isn't that a new idea? And not the mind to the body. I'd like to suggest, give some thought to this as we delve into our topic today. So, choices. And there's a very interesting verse here in Deuteronomy 30, Verse 19, I call heaven and earth to witness before you that today I have set before you life or death, blessing or curse. Oh, that you would choose life, the abundant life, that you and your children might live. Because, folks, what we do affects our children and our grandchildren because we become role models. We're sitting in church and we are 30, 40 years of age and we work on our smartphones during the sermon. Guess what happens? The kids are sitting next to us. Guess what they're doing? Exactly the same thing. We're role models. We're sitting around the table and we're looking at our smartphones, our iPhones. Why don't you just drop them in a box, everybody, before you come to the table? And we just sit together and we enjoy the food and we talk like we used to talk. Technology has many blessings, but also many distractions. So, today I want to talk to you about fork and knife, weapons of mass destruction. I mean, really? And tomorrow morning, I'm going to change the topic. Tomorrow I'm going to talk to you about fork and knife, instruments of health, hope, and healing. So make a little change in your program. Okay? Tomorrow we'll talk about part 2. Today's part 1. How fork and knife can be weapons of mass destruction. Tomorrow morning, fork and knife, instruments of hope, health, and healing. So I'll give you a quick history, an overview. 1948, Japan, the medical school in the University of Tokyo, they want to show medical students in Japan of what kills every second American, heart disease. And they don't have any samples. I mean, they do autopsies on these Japanese people and they have clean arteries. And so we need to have clogged arteries to show people what kills every second American. So they write to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore and said, can we buy from you some coronary arteries from American people? Of course, they die first. Then they excise them and they ship them to Tokyo to show medical students in Japan what kills, at that time, every second American, heart disease. That's why I chose that song today, that theme song. Let's live with all of our hearts. See? So this was 1948, right after the war. I can tell you, the Japanese no longer purchase coronary arteries from an American university because they grow their own now. They're very self-sufficient. They brought the American foods in, and that will give them the coronary arteries that are clogged up. So, 1949, the American government became very concerned. Why is it every second American is dying from heart disease, and yet this disease cannot be found in that it was 80-90% of the world's population? Why America? Why Australia? Why some of the European countries? And they started this large study called the Framingham Study, where they have enrolled 4,000 some people, and they followed them year after year, and they're still doing the same study. It's on the third generation because they want to see what is the effect from one generation to the next. It's a very powerful study, and they found, and I'll show it to you later on, there are 3 major factors. Number 1, cholesterol. Number 2, blood pressure. And number 2, smoking. These 3 are predictive of influencing the course of heart disease. We'll come back to that later on. So this is the famous Framingham study. This is the gold standard when it comes to understanding research and also how the heart works and what contributes to heart disease. Then about 1957, a very famous man by the name of Ansel Keys. Now, that man doesn't mean anything to you, I know. But to us, he is on a pedestal in the research community. Ansel Keys. Have you heard of the K rations? Anybody heard of K rations? This is the Keys rations. He developed this food that the soldiers to take into battle. So that's Ansel Keys, and he was a very famous man. He was very brilliant. He was a genius, man. And in 1957, he was the chief of a large study that looked at many different countries around the world and said, let's take a look at how these people eat and live and see if they have different disease rates. Is disease and diet related somehow? What are the possible factors? And here's what he found. I'll come to it in just a few minutes. But he found that there was nothing more important to driving the amount of heart disease than saturated fat consumption. What are saturated fats? Solid at room temperature, and they're found predominantly where? In animal products, but also in coconut oil, palm oil. Have you heard of coconut oil as being pure? It reverses. Folks, don't believe it. Coconut oil is the worst of all oils to drive heart disease because it's 92% saturation. The more saturation, the more it drives the cholesterol in the body, the more heart disease. On the other hand, when you have beef, that's 50% saturation. It gives you some idea how powerful, how high the saturation level of coconut oil is. And yet, these companies from Malaysia, they pour huge amounts of research, marketing money into America to tell Americans that's pure fat. That's pure the way nature made it. Folks, enjoy the coconuts. That's the way God made them. But leave the coconut oil alone. They had a big discussion the other day. Not a discussion, it was a major conference, the American Heart Association. And here's what they recommend. They say, we recommend coconut oil. Put it on your skin and on your scalp. Don't put it inside the body. Okay. So they found that saturated fats and serum cholesterol, the cholesterol in the bloodstream, were the drivers, the indicators, the markers of the emergence of clogged arteries and heart disease, and with it all the other problems that come with the clogging of arteries. And then in 1978, the government, the National Institutes of Health, launched a very, very ambitious project where they had 350,000 men involved. They didn't put any women into the project at the time because there were differences with women versus men because they have hormone issues, and hormones affect the cholesterol in some ways. And so they just selected, at that time at least, men for the study. Since then we have, fortunately, done the research with women too. They are not stepchildren any longer in American medicine. It was high time to correct this. But there were some good reasons at the time. So they did what they called the Mr. Fit study. That's called multiple risk factor intervention trial. They looked at different things. If we change the cholesterol, if you change the smoking, if you change the diet, can we reduce heart disease? So this is the big, big study that had 350,000 people enrolled, and we spent over hundreds of millions of dollars on this study to get some idea what's the relation between these risk factors, what is driving this disease called heart disease, which was very rarely found around the world, but was very prominently found in our society. And here's what you find. These are some of the results. This was published in the medical journals. And what you see here is, I should maybe point to this site here sometimes too, right? So you don't feel left out. Do you see the dots on the left, the very lowest one? It is about 4. That means 4 deaths per 1,000 people when the cholesterol was below 150. And as the cholesterol on the right-hand side goes to 175, 225, 275, goes up to 300, you see on the left-hand side, instead of having 4 deaths, you have now more like 18 deaths, which means you have 5 times more heart disease deaths just based on that one finding, the amount of cholesterol in your bloodstream. Do we understand this? There is nothing that gives you a better idea of the likelihood of developing heart disease than the cholesterol that we have in our blood. Now, there are different factions within the blood, and we can talk about that later on. But the most important one for right now is the amount of total cholesterol that you have in your bloodstream becomes the most powerful indicator of the likelihood of you developing coronary artery disease or any kind of arterial narrowing or closure. Here's Dr. Stamler. He's one of the famous men. He said he wrote 87% of all the major coronary events, the heart disease events, the heart attacks before age 85 could be prevented if Americans would lower their cholesterol to less than 180 points and their blood pressure to less than 125. Okay? So these were some very important findings. So he said you can almost knock out heart disease if you just get the cholesterol down to levels of 180. Now we begin to talk about 160, and if we would really bring down the blood pressure by normal means, ideally. And if you add smoking to that, eliminate that, you can protect yourself from this common disease. Here's Dr. Gotter, who was then the president of the American Heart Association. He spoke before the Senate. This goes back to 1978. These are all the big old studies that were done, all funded by the government. Do you hear what I just said? Funded by whom? By the government. It's different. When you have the government funding it, it's an objective research that comes out. It's not tarnished by self-interest groups or lobby groups. Okay? Here's then the voices of the past. Here's Dr. Goddard. He said, in societies and countries around the world with blood cholesterol below 160 points, it's virtually impossible of finding heart disease or atherosclerosis, that means narrowing of the arteries. So cholesterol in the blood emerged as one of the drivers and the markers of this common modern killer disease. So this then caused a lot of new research to be done. This is what we call metabolic ward studies, where they're feeding experiments with monkeys, they're feeding experiments with roosters, they're feeding experiments with humans. And they give humans different kind of diets. And they modify the amount of saturated fat. And they change the polyunsaturated fats. They change things. They change the amount of cholesterol that people eat. And guess what? They develop mathematical formulas that will predict actually what the likelihood is that you develop heart disease based on the amount of saturated fat and the amount of cholesterol that you have in your bloodstream and some other factors. It's a pretty intriguing science. Well developed. Harvard, all the big universities were involved in those studies in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. And then, of course, they found that what drives the cholesterol in the blood is the cholesterol that you eat and the amount of saturated fat. Where do you find most of the saturated fat and the cholesterol? Cholesterol is only found in animal products. Saturated fat is almost exclusively found in animal products, plus those palm oil and coconut oils we talked about. So if I ask you on the test next week, where do you find cholesterol? What would you say? Tell me, where would you find cholesterol? Give me food.
Meat products.
In meat product, okay. Give me a particular meat. Pork.
Hot dog.
Hot dogs. How about eggs? Big time. Chicken. How about liver? Some people eat liver. See? Cheese. Yeah, these are the kind of foods. Okay. So what's really important is they also found that for every 1% drop, this is for some of the scientists here in the audience, for every 1% drop in your blood cholesterol, you can lower your likelihood of a stroke, and particularly of a heart attack, by 2.5%. Now that doesn't mean very much to you right now, but I'll give you an example. Okay, I've it on the board there. If you bring your cholesterol down from 250, let's say, down to 200, that means you have dropped it by 50 points. 50 points out of 250, that's about a 20% drop. 20% drop in your blood cholesterol. How much do you lower your coronary risk?
50%. Wouldn't it be 50?
For every percent drop in cholesterol, you reduce your coronary risk by 2.5 times that. So if you drop your cholesterol by 20% times 2.5, it's 50%. In just 30 days, if you make some dietary change, in 30 days, by and large, in just 30 days, you can go from 250 down to 200 if you make some dietary changes, and you have cut your risk of a heart attack in half in just 30 days, no medications, nothing. And when you do this, your blood sugar comes down. Your blood pressure usually has a tendency to come down. your weight comes down, your depression lifts. I mean, you have all the bonuses that come with it. And no side effects, only good side effects. It's different from the medications that you take for lowering cholesterol. They can bring your cholesterol down too, but it doesn't protect the heart. There's a lot of discussion about that right now. And you say always have to worry about the money involved, the side effects involved, and it only takes care of one thing. If you have a drug for blood pressure, it takes care of one item, blood pressure. If you take a drug for cholesterol, it takes care of one thing, and that is cholesterol. If you take a drug for high blood sugar, what happens? It takes care of blood sugar, and that's it. When you make the dietary changes, it takes care of everything because it affects the whole body. That's the difference between a pharmaceutical approach, which is very, very part-specific, versus a dietary lifestyle approach, which affects all of the system in the body. 100 trillion cells are becoming affected. Here you see the difference in the cholesterol levels in the populations. Just take a look at the top line. Okay, it says the U.S. diet, that's a common American diet, the average cholesterol is about 208. Then you go to a lacto or vegetarian, you know what that is, right? Lacto or vegetarian diet, and usually on the average it's about 175 cholesterol. If you have a lacto vegetarian diet, that means you don't eat any animal products except you have some dairy products, lacto, then your cholesterol can be around 165. If you are a pure vegetarian, then you have the lowest cholesterol of about 141. So you can influence the likelihood, the risk of heart disease, not only of heart disease, but of a stroke. You can affect the likelihood of impotence, because that's also a disease of narrowed arteries, right? I mean, impotence is not a Viagra deficiency. These vessels are very, very small. They're much smaller than the coronary artery. And when they clog up with the blood, I'll show it to you in just a few minutes, you know, the blood can no longer sustain the proper flow, and things begin to change. It doesn't have to be that way. And tomorrow maybe we can talk about how to change the direction and reverse these diseases. So here's Dr. Stamler again. He gave a famous address in 1978, and he said, this is a major address before the American Heart Association, and he said, it is further reasonable and sound to designate the rich diet as the primary, the essential, the necessary cause of the current epidemic of premature atherosclerotic disease raging in Western industrialized countries. What he basically is saying is, the more you have a rich diet in a society, the more likely it is that you have narrowing of the arteries and all the diseases that come with it. That's what that means. That we find, he says, in industrialized countries. Then you have the Surgeon General. Some of you may remember this gentleman. He passed away recently at the age of 102. He said, for 2 out of 3 adult Americans, 2 out of 3, one personal choice influences long-term health prospects more than any other: what we eat. This is not some kind of an Adventist fanatic that says that. This is the Surgeon General of the United States. And by that, he is basically attacking the whole food industry. I mean, this is a huge act of courage of a man that says in a major report, this is what's causing most of the diseases. It's our rich diet. Now, I want to give an example. I just came back from Lithuania. And I'll tell you this story in the next few days, but I'll give you some ideas here. In Lithuania, which at one time was really, it has always been a European country, but the Russians took it over after World War II and turned it into a Russian protectorate. And with that, as the Russians left in 1991, they finally, when the wall collapsed in Berlin, many countries became freed from the enslavement of the Soviet Union system. And Lithuania was one of these countries. In 1981, the Russians were kicked out, the Russians left, the East left, and guess who came in? The West. See, it was a political change that took the Russians out, but now you have a cultural change that took place as there is now a vacuum. Now the West comes in, and here you see you have all the hot dogs coming in. They have 7 different national hot dogs that are coming in. These are the kind of foods. I wish you could see the real colors. Unfortunately, our projector lights are not quite working as it should. But these are all American and European foods that are there. I mean, it was just like being in an American store. I mean, I was totally shocked. I went to a gas station, and the man said to me, we don't make our profits from gas, pumping gas. We're a gas station, but that's not where the profit comes from. Thanks to America, we made good profits. Look at this. I mean, we even had Monster drinks. This is 4 years ago. It was just like we were in America, but maybe more blatant and larger, because they never had anything like this, and all of a sudden they want everybody to come into their system. Finally, we have some good food. It tastes wonderful. They become addicted, and they want to make up for lost time. And then here you see the data. This is now 2014. This is now, they've been using this for about 20, 25 years, and you see heart disease is now 69%, 69% of all the women now in Lithuania die from heart disease. It used to be more like 40% 15 years, 20 years earlier. They're moving just like what happened in Japan. It increased dramatically these Western diseases because of Western food. You live like an American, you die like an American. What are we doing? Clinton said when they had these big tariff negotiations between countries, where they negotiate the levies, the taxes that are being asserted between countries, Clinton gave clear instructions to his team. We can give anything away we want to, but we need to have monopoly on films. Because with films, we distribute the American culture. With films, we distribute the desirability of smoking. The people see it, and smoking becomes a fashion in these countries. When they see the high refined candy bars, they see it in the films. They imitate. It's the good life. And people want the good life. And America is being seen as the good life. And it is, but it's a dangerous life. I just came back from Saudi Arabia, and the Arabs are becoming very interested in health now, because they said, we are becoming a poor nation. I mean, the oil prices are so low, we have to do something differently. We can no longer afford all these high-tech medical approaches. They came to me and said, our kings used to live 85, 89 years. They lived on dates and nuts and some mutton that they used to have there, But now our kings are at 49 having bypass surgery. And you go to the shopping centers, they're open 24 hours a day. It's a fabulous place. I mean, it's a Hyatt of sort-like structure, and people are there everywhere. Saudi Arabia, they said, we can no longer afford bypass surgery. $150,000 for a bypass, and they don't really last that long. We can't do it. Here's what you see. You don't have to even look for the golden arches there anymore. You just look where are the longest queues in front of some outlet there, and you look there and you know that's McDonald's. And you see all these women in their burqas, black, dressed like this. Just the eyes. But They somehow found an opening here. And today, the Saudi Arabian women are probably the largest, heaviest women in the world. I mean, look at the children there. The Saudis are in big, big trouble. 35% of the adults, of the children, 35% of the children are obese, not just overweight, obese, that means very large. And here you see the data. In America, we have about 38% of our people are overweight, 33% of them are obese, so that means that about 71% of our population is overweight and obese. That's America. Many people no longer walk, they just waddle. I have a special lecture on obesity the next couple of days. We'll talk about that. I'll show you how you can eat more and weigh less. Interested? Eat more and weigh less? Sounds okay? Take a look. Now, please look at diabetes. The United States is on the left side there. About 49% of the American adults are either pre-diabetic, moving towards diabetes, or they already have diabetes. 49%. In Saudi Arabia, 90% of the adult women either have pre-diabetes or full-blown diabetes. 90%. Do you know what that means? Eye problems, hearing problems, mental problems. You know what that means? Kidney problems, heart disease, amputations of the legs. This is the U.S. Here we have now, we used to have every second death came from heart disease in the 1950s. Now it's about every third. 30% of our deaths come from heart disease and from stroke. And then cancer is about 25%. Please note, what many people don't know is that it was very rare to find heart disease in America in the 1910s and 1920s. Just like in Japan in 1950. Here you see the data from a very big, famous medical textbook, famous authored Sir William Osler. He wrote, when it comes to coronary heart disease in America in 1928, we can expect one heart attack a year in an average hospital in an average-sized town. Did you get that one? When they had a heart attack in 1928 in some of these hospitals, they would call all the medical students, all the doctors. There's an unusual case that we have here. We've never seen this before. The heart has been attacked. How about today? Today we have 3,000 heart attacks a day. And cardiovascular disease is responsible for every third death in our society. These are largely self-made diseases. They're culturally promoted diseases. We can look at cancer. Here we look at breast cancer again here. You see 1960, 1 in 20 women. Now it's 1 in 7 women that will develop breast cancer. The finest medical approaches are not going to affect the incidence, the developmental rate of these diseases. Yeah, we can do something afterwards, perhaps, to some extent, but is it not better to prevent than to repair? 1 in 7 women will develop breast cancer today. It used to be 1 in 20 in 1960. Something happened in the meantime. What happened in 1970? Let's take a look at that. But let's take a look at the weight issue. What do you see there? What happened over the time? You look at 1900 to 1930, 1970. Did the width of a chair change? Not very much. Not very much. It's almost the same. Look at the 17 inches, and then it went up to 17.7 inches. But then, 1980, 1990, today, it's now 24 inches. We have enlarged our chairs because we had too much lumber to spare. in one of my audiences, and he said, my wife is an antique collector, and I think she has some chairs up in the attic. Do you mind if I give her a call? I want to ask her to measure that chair. It's an old chair. I mean, you're just going back to 1900. This must have been 1850 or something. And so I said, go ahead. But I tell you, I learned a lesson. You never say, go ahead, because he could make your point that you want to make to disappear. And that's exactly what happened. You see 24 inches there now? And he comes back and he said, I talked to my wife, she went up to the attic, she measured everything out, and he said, the chair is 27 and a half inches. And she thinks it's 1850. And I lost my whole argument. And then he said, no. She said it was a love seat for two. I felt a moment of relief there. But you see, we have become larger as a society. Diabetes has increased by 400%, 4 times more diabetes today than 30 years ago. 30 years ago, that was 1980. What happened in 1980? How come we developed all of a sudden diabetes? We thought that was a genetic disease, and it takes 300 years to develop a genetic change in a society to produce a genetic disease like we thought diabetes was. This isn't a genetic disease. That happened in 30 years. Genes don't change in 30 years. It takes 300. Just to give you some idea. People say, well, yeah, because we live so much longer now, that's why we have all these diseases, because these are diseases of old age. You know, when you're 70 years of age, 60 years of age, you have these diseases. Well, not really. It's a good argument. People say, well, we live so much longer now. Well, let me ask you, how many years do you think we have added to our lifespan over the last 100 years? Let's take a look. Okay? How many years do you think we have added to the lifespan over the last 100 years? Take a guess. 10 years? How many years do we live longer now than 100 years ago? 20? Okay, how many years more? We live longer now than 100 years ago? Yes, how many years? 15. 15, okay, this is like an auction. 10, 15, 20, okay. 25, okay. No idea, okay. Well, take a guess. 30 years, okay. Anybody else? Anyone who's bidding higher, 40 years. So here we have from 10 to 40 years. People say we live today 40 years longer than 100 years ago. True or false? Who says false? Why?
Because I read the book.
Did you hear what he said? He read the book. You see, what you sometimes don't realize is that 100 years ago, we had these infectious diseases, and they wiped out the children. Before they reached age 1, every 5th baby was dead. So that lowers the life expectancy of the whole society. But once you make adjustments for that, we don't lose babies anymore. I mean, it's virtually impossible to lose a baby. We can put them into incubators. They may only be 20 weeks old, and we can save them, right? So today we don't have these high rates of infant mortality, and so we no longer have the diminishment in our life expectancy because of high infant mortality rates. Are you with me there? So what we need to do, you need to, well, I sometimes go to cemeteries. I do. I go there and I check the markers, the gravestones. And especially when I go to different countries, because I'm always intrigued, when did people die 150 years ago? And some of these countries have beautiful markers. In England, for instance. And you know, I sometimes find people, here lies so-and-so, died at 75, 85, 95. 95, 100 years ago, impossible. No, they didn't have any medical care then. We didn't have antibiotics. That cannot be. Yes, it is. Yeah, some of the people died at 50. But on the average, they didn't really live that much shorter a lifespan than what we do today as adults. So you have to ask the question differently to get the answer. How many years do we live longer today as 65-year-old people? Because then you don't have to worry about the infant mortality rates anymore, right? So you ask the question, a person that lived in 1900 that was 65 years of age, how many more years do you think they had to expect? Well, there are a certain number of years that they could expect to live. Today, if you take a 65-year-old, they can expect to live to be 79 to 80 years. When you take the difference, you find that the difference is about 7-8 years at the most. So people they live today maybe 7 or 8 years longer than people lived 100 years ago. Some of you said 40, and that's what you sometimes read in the paper. But they don't make adjustments for the high infant mortality rates. So here you see, if you're 45 to 64 years old, you see 50% more chronic disease in this age group. You go to the 61 to 79 age group, 50% plus more chronic disease. You go to those that are over 80 years of age, again, 50% more chronic disease. Today, we have people, young people, that we never had before that have chronic diseases. When I went to school, we were told, look for a person that is 50 years of age and fat, and suspect that that person may have diabetes. Today, we tell medical students, look for people that are 40 years of age and large. Look for people that are 30 years of age and large. Look for people that are 20 years of age and large. Look for 15-year-old, for teenagers that are large, that already have diabetes in many, many cases. We used to call this juvenile onset. No more. This is not juvenile, this is adult onset. We used to get this disease when they were 50, 60, 70 years of age. Now the 50-year-olds have it. So these diseases that we talk about here today, they're not just so prevalent today because we're living longer. Because how many more years have we gained as adults? 7 years. It's not really that much. And yet, this is what you see in the press. This is what you see in Time magazine. This is what you see in medical journals. Here's an article by a journalist. She published this article, and it was accepted by the British Medical Journal. A shocking experience. And they said, hey, butter is in. There's no scientific justification that we shouldn't eat butter. It's saturated fat. There's no justification that we should cut back on meat. There's no justification for that. Meat is okay. Enjoy meat. You grow taller. You can see that. It says, a new study shows that saturated fat is not so bad after all. And there's here, we have the new rules of the heart. We have the new studies that say you can do whatever you want. It's going to be okay because the old studies, they're old studies. Folks, please listen carefully what I'm going to tell you next. The old studies were well-done studies by the finest scientists we had. And they were funded by whom? By the government, by the National Institute of Health. The new studies, almost all of them are funded, that you see nowadays, are published by whom? Funded by whom? By the pharma industry, by the food industry, by the dairy industry. They fund these studies, and they publish them, and they make sure that the results will favor the outcomes. And that's why you have so much confusion. In general, it's very, very easy. I can give you the best prescription for a long life. When it comes to diet, two rules. Number one, try to avoid foods that have nutrition labels. These foods are made for profit, not for health. You take God's design and you manufacture it, you process it, you refine it, and then you can make a big profit on it. Be careful with foods that are carrying nutrition labels.
Value added.
You want the second rule? Or did I already upset you too much already? When you use these foods that have nutrition labels, use them occasionally and read them carefully. Some of them may be okay, but in general, be careful. You should be on high alert And you see these foods on the shelf with nutrition labels. Then there's another group, and you should be careful with those too. These are the foods that carry warning labels. When you go to the meat counter and you buy your chicken, you see warning labels there about salmonella, be sure you wash it, all these kind of things. Be careful with animal products. So if you cut back on animal products, and if you cut back on refined, engineered, processed foods, you're on the right track. And then what's left to eat? Anything? Fruits. Not fruit juices. Fruits. Vegetables, you can buy them frozen or fresh, it's fine. Just make sure they don't add too much salt. Number 3, whole grains. I didn't say white flour. The woman said, eat grains. And people say, yeah, great, grains, that's white flour. Pizza is in. It's a healthy food. It's grains. Folks, no, it's whole grains. That's totally different. Whole grains have the fiber. With whole grains, you're on the move. It does wonders to you. Whole grains. And then the next one is perhaps one of the most important ones, legumes. We should have legumes, beans and lentils every day. Particularly for people with diabetes. They're inexpensive. They're absolutely loaded with nutritional value. They're high in fiber. Just don't buy them in cans. Because when you buy them in cans, then there are salt piles. They're salt mines. Put them in a crock pot at night, turn the heat on, the next morning it's done. And you save yourself a lot of money and you save yourself health. Does that make sense? Have you ever tried this? Somebody came to me and said, do I have to put them in a crock pot the night before? They have to cook overnight? I said, no, you can cook them over the daytime too. There's no... It just takes some time, right? Okay. So, we talked about, I asked you the question earlier, what happened in the 1970s that all of a sudden we had so much more disease? So much more overweight. Well, fast food industry began to emerge outside of the sacred walls of Loma Linda in California. That's where McDonald's had their first McDonald's in San Bernardino. And it swept the country, as you can see here, over $200 billion industry. And this is the most important slide here. Here's what I want you to see. When you buy food, when you buy a meal, they will analyze it according to where the calories come from. And the calories come from either from protein or from starch or from sugar or from fat. Water has no calories. But calories always come from vegetables? No. They come from fats, protein, and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are divided into starches and sugars. That's where the calories come from. Please look at the left side there. When you go to a small country like, well, let's say that you go to Mexico. You go to one of these small farms. And people, what do the people eat in Mexico? What do they eat? Beans. Beans is starch, isn't it? Right? Okay, what else do they eat? What do they eat? What? So you said what?
I said rice.
Rice, okay, brown rice. What else? That's a starch. Beans, that's a starch. Corn, that's a starch. These people live on a high starch diet. The yellow here is starch. This is a 70% starch diet. And this is where you have all the vitamins and minerals and the fiber. But also when you eat these starchy foods, they always have enough protein. When you eat brown rice, you have protein there. When you eat beans, there's lots of protein there. You never have to worry about protein ever again in your life. If you get enough calories into your system, you never have to worry about getting enough protein because protein is everywhere. Even in an orange, you have 1 or 2 grams of protein. People think, well, protein comes from meat. No. When you have a piece of meat, that's fat. That's 70% fat. The rest is protein. No carbohydrates there. Please note, so when you eat these simple foods, they're high in starch, there's always enough protein there, and there's some little fat there. When you eat corn has corn oil, right? So you get always enough. You don't have to worry, I have some deficiency somehow. But then something happens. The Mexican farmer tells his wife, the kids are growing up. I should really move to Mexico City, get a job there, and I'll send the money to you. In about 3 years, we'll have enough money. I'll bring you up to the big city. And we can educate the kids. So he now becomes a computer programmer. He's in a big city. Guess what happens? He used to eat at home. Now he eats out. He used to eat whole foods. Now he eats processed foods. He used to drink water. Now he drinks Coke and lemonade. He used to eat beans. Now he eats burgers. He used to eat potatoes. Now he eats potato chips. He used to eat corn. Now he eats Doritos. Are you with me? This happened in the 1970s. That was the big food revolution in America. And it swept the whole world. And from that moment on, we cut back on the fiber in the food. At that time, we began to reduce the amount of nutritional value because it all became now the brilliance of taste experience. The more sugar, the better it tasted. The more fat, the better the mouth feel. We played to the taste buds, and we perverted the taste experience of people very purposefully. You may not know this, but I'll come back in just a minute here. This is the sugar consumption. You see the patterns from 2 teaspoons to 30 teaspoons per person a day. We used to have potatoes. You can eat 10 potatoes, and that's the same number of calories as you have in 1 tube of Pringles. I asked my medical students, how long does it take you to eat those tube of Pringles? Oh, they said about 13 minutes. I said, do you know how many calories? No. I said, 1,000 calories. 1,000 calories in 13 minutes? Okay. Now, if you don't have potato chips anymore, and you don't have any of Pringles, you have to eat real potatoes. How many potatoes do you have to eat to get 1,000 calories that you could consume in 30 minutes as Pringles? I said, we don't know, sir. We don't take nutrition medical school. True. I said, would you believe it takes 10 potatoes to get 1,000 calories? That's the same as having 1 tube of Pringles. And people come and say, I cannot eat potatoes. They're fattening. Folks, where did this ever come from? Yeah, Pringles are fattening. Yeah, if you have potatoes and you put the butter and the sour cream and the cheese in there, it's a different story. Why don't you just put next time yesterday's lentil soup on top of the baked potato? Psh. That's all you need to do. And this lentil soup always tastes better the second day. Right? Yeah. Or take a look at this. This is a milkshake there, right? This is a big one, 24 ounces. It's true. It's large. But look at this. This is 2,000 calories. My wife needs about 1,500 calories to be in good health. For her size, for her exercise that she does, she needs about 1,500 calories. Just one milkshake, this big one, would be 2,000 calories. When I ask people, they come to me and they say, well, I'm gaining weight, I eat like a bird, and I don't understand it. There's something wrong. I said, what kind of a bird are you?
Every day.
That milkshake is 153 grams of sugar. That's the same as 40 teaspoons in one milkshake. It's a big one, but 40 teaspoons of sugar, and you have 120 divided by 30 grams of, that's about, that's about 30 teaspoons of fat, oil, and grease. That's what makes it taste so good. It's the sugar and the fat and the oil. Candy bars is sugar and fat, basically. And so this is what we do then. The American public in general consumes about half of all the calories that they eat as empty calories. What's an empty calorie? No nutritional value. So we are overfed, and malnutrition is common in our society. We used to think people are malnourished because they don't get enough to eat. We have too much to eat, and we're malnourished because we eat the wrong foods. And so a lot of authority figures have talked about this, that we have made this transition from food to becoming an industrialized product. We no longer eat the way food comes to us in nature, God designed. We go from coming out of the hand of God, going to a laboratory where it's being processed. We're paying through the nose for it, both for the product and for health costs. The food industry supports the medical industry. Big time. But let me share with you, this is a book that you all should read. It's called Salt, Sugar, Fat. It came out 4 years ago. How the food giants hooked us. This is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, an outstanding researcher. And he found, as he interviewed retired executives of these large processing food companies, he interviewed them after they had retired. When they're working, they don't tell you anything, but when they retire, they will tell you a few of the secrets. Maybe they want to cleanse their souls somehow too. And so he had all these interviews on tape, and he wrote this book. It's a fabulous book, and it makes you very upset because you learn that many of these companies gave the order to one of the largest brain research centers. Tell us, how much sugar do we have to put into this product to make people wanting to eat it again and again and again? How do we addict people? That was the question. How much sugar do we need? How much salt do we need? How much fat do we need? Because it creates this addictive pattern. Have you ever wondered why you cannot just eat one Pringle? Can you just eat one M&M? Yeah, a bag, yeah, of course, but... Within seconds on the taste buds, it creates a neurological pathway that becomes activated, and you hit this pleasure center in the brain. It says, I want more! There's nothing you can do. That's why I always tell people, do not bring these foods into the house. And then you ask the Lord, please, Lord, bless me that I made me sure I don't take the things that I have in the house. Don't bring it into the house in the first place. Otherwise, you're a goner. Well, we can also talk about the whole concept of animal products. I have just a couple of minutes left here. See what happens to the animal products here, the consumption of meat and sausages and so on. It has doubled in the last 100 years. When you look at the amount of animals that are being produced, the average person, the average American meat eater processes 12 cows in a lifetime. I mean, we eat 12 cows. 25 hogs. 2,400 chickens. Cholesterol, saturated fat, no fiber. We pollute the environment. We have no compassion towards animals when you know how these animals are slaughtered. We kill 1 million animals every hour in this country so that our stomachs become the graveyards of these poor creatures. There are people out there that are really up in arms. There are animal rights, they call them. I'm not one of those, but I'm becoming much more sympathetic towards them after I begin to understand what really happens in these abattoirs and these slaughterhouses. Somebody said, if the slaughterhouse in America would have no walls, they would just have glass walls, and you could look in, you would never eat another piece of meat in your life. And please note, processed meat, look at the hot dog down at the bottom there. It's 15% protein and 85% fat. Folks, you have to think differently. Protein is not found in a high level in meat. It's largely a high-fat product. And you don't have to worry about protein anymore. Meat, you see that sirloin steak, it's 25-30% protein and 70 to 75% fat. And then please note, the World Health Organization declared processed meat a number one carcinogen in the American diet, directly responsible as a cause of colon cancer. And the more meat you have, the more processed meat you eat, the more processed meat, the more likelihood you have colon cancer. Dairy products. Cheese is about 70% fat. And please see what happened to the cheese consumption in 1970. It really soared. If somebody asked me, what should we eat? Should we eat cheese or chicken? I would say, well, do you want to be shot or do you want to be hung? Because the number one source of saturated fat in the American diet today, is cheese. Cheese is everywhere. Cheese is holding our culture together. It's the glue. You can't imagine a country like America without pizza. You cannot imagine pizza without cheese, right? We've got to be very, very much aware of some of these things. So this is now the number one source of saturated fat. This drives the cholesterol more than anything else in the body that drives then the heart disease. So I want to close with this kind of a slide here. This is the American diet. Dangerous. 51% of all the calories that we eat in America come from refined foods. 26 plus 9%, 35% comes from animal products, and only 14% of the calories that we eat comes out of the hand of the master designer. Ladies and gentlemen, this is God's foods. Minority slice, 14%. Adventists are not that different. We've become secularized increasingly in the last 30, 40 years. We're children of our time. We're children of our age. We're subject to the marketing and everything else that's taking place there. We are harried people, quick, and we grab something here, we grab something there. We need to begin to focus more on these kind of foods here. These ought to be, in my estimation, at least 70% of the calories that we eat. 70%. We should increase dramatically, 5 times the amount of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, and have a few nuts and some seeds. Have you heard that before? That's the science. You talk to the Heart Association, they will tell you, eat more fruits and vegetables. You talk to the cancer societies, they tell you, eat more whole grains and legumes. You go to Harvard and you ask them, what shall we eat? And they will say, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and healthy protein. And then they say, no milk, because milk has no function in the human body. Milk is a perfect food for the offspring of the original animal that provides it. We recommend milk to be given, cow's milk, to calves. This is coming from Harvard. This is not some fanatical Adventist vegetarians. And we have counsel for over 100 years, 150 years, that we ought to move in that direction. And so I want to entreat you. We have a choice today. We need to go back to the DNA that we have as an Adventist people. We ought to be willing and be happy to ask the Lord to bless the food that we have. I don't know how the Lord really feels when we have some of these unusual foods on our plates, and then we ask the Lord, bless this food. I think we should say, Lord, forgive us. We have become children of our age. We have to rethink issues. We may not be able to do it all at once, but let us move in the right direction. Let us move from the red colored triangle towards the green triangle more and more. And when that happens, you're improving ecology, you're improving the climate, you show more compassion towards animals, and your health will become a new level, and you will live with all your heart the abundant life. Thank you very much.